Hello everybody, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Serrated Cucumber, and in today's video, I've got something a little bit different for you all. So, as you know, episode 4 of Life is Strange 2 just released on the 22nd of August, and I have to say that Don't Nod really outdid themselves with this episode. I can't yet decide whether I prefer this or episode 3, but these two are currently contending for the spot of my favourite episode within this whole game. Even past Brave New World or Darkroom, Wastelands and Faith really do take the cake for me, and they're my favourite episodes by far within this series. So I thought, in spirit of my overwhelmingly positive thoughts on episode 4, I'd put together a review for the episode, like a first impressions kind of thing. I'm new to these kind of videos, so for now I'm just going to follow a format of talking about the game scene by scene, all the way from Sean's dream in the beginning to the very end of them driving away with Karen to Arizona. I'll be discussing characters, music, animation, general quality, gameplay, choices, etc. I say this in every video, but obviously there'll be huge plot spoilers for Life is Strange 2 up to the ending of episode 4, Captain Spirit, and some potential references to Life is Strange season 1 and Before the Storm. With that, you've been sufficiently warned and we can move on to the main body of this video. So this installation is finally done after the 3.5 month wait. And we're met with a very familiar nostalgic scene, Sean and Daniel sitting in the forest overlooking the river at which they'll camp during their third night away from home, after Esteban was shot in Seattle. From seeing their classic episode 1 look, the player is reminded of a time before all the stresses of their real journey had begun, Sean still with 2 eyes and Daniel still with his old hair, which we'll definitely get onto later. Sean and Daniel talk a little, with Daniel apologising for the heist and asking Sean when he would come and get him, as he had been missing for 2 months. Sean reaches out as Daniel falls off the cliff, and the scene cuts to Sean waking up in his hospital room from a nightmare. Personally, this scene is probably the weakest in the episode, to be honest, though it does remind us of episode 1, yet we're forced to see this with rose-tinted glasses a little bit. Sean's journey has gotten so much worse since then, with him losing an iron ore, and we long for those moments we spent when Daniel was still innocent and happy, content to yell and play hide and seek in the forest, before he knew about all of the pain and suffering that would come his way. But we must remember that originally Sean was internally wrecked at this moment. Now, Esteban dying is probably the least of his problems, which is kind of a sad reminder of what he's been through, really. Overall, the scene gets a 6.5 out of 10, a good reminder, but kind of forgettable in the terms of the episode. So then we're woken up, in hospital, with Sean's beautiful egg-shaped shaven head, and we see immediately that he has a big bandage over his eye signifying his injury. The hospital room is quiet and eerie with a very sterile, cold colour palette, which gives you the sense that Sean's time here is not spent happily at all, just from a visual standpoint. Sean's character model here looks older, more worn out. One would not guess from looking at it that this was the countenance of a 16-year-old boy. He awakes from a nightmare, stressed, and we get to see around his room at some of his possessions, and we learn a few things, such as the fact that he's been in contact with Agent Flores of the FBI. We learn about how his disability is affecting him, and we actually get a chance to view some letters from Claire, Stephen, Chris, and Cassidy. These are really nice touches. I mention a lot in my theory and prediction videos that letters from previous characters are a great way to remind us that they're alive and well, and this is a good throwback. There were several other variations of Cassidy's letter, which I really appreciate for the choice and consequence mechanics, since it all has to do with your choices in episode 3, your relationship with her. The relationship with Joey, Sean's nurse, felt authentic, even if Joey was excessively bubbly and positive. The dynamic of hardened, upset patient and uplifting / morally strong nurse did feel good, and Sean can even agree with him and try and stay on the up, so to speak, so it was nice, I appreciated it. The conversation with Agent Flores was interesting, to say the least. Sean is apprehensive, no matter what our decisions, yet I wish there was more to explore with Maria. She has the conversation in Spanish with her son and her mother, who's presumed to be babysitting her son during her assignment in California. There could have easily been opportunities for Sean to open up a little more about the racist implications behind his father's shooting. He actually alludes to this at one point, saying,
"Just guilty of being... who knows."
This could be perceived that he was about to point out the attack possibly being associated with race, and would have been a good opportunity to open up with Agent Flores, to get her on her side a little bit more. I'm a little bit unsatisfied with how the interview went. She didn't really ask any huge questions, and there were no huge consequences to this scene. We had the question that she asked about Finn, whether he was the leader of the heist, and Sean can choose to agree about this or lie about it. It's still a difficult choice for sure whether to lie about Finn. Personally, I threw him under the bus, but as always with these choices, I'd love to hear what you all did, so if you'd like, drop it in the comments and we can discuss. Next, Sean finds out through his diary that Daniel was in Haven Point, which felt a little bit awkward, but served well. I do want to say, however, that I'm incredibly grateful for how the huge time skip was handled in the episode. Sean waking up in a hospital bed after the cliffhanger was the perfect way to bridge the gap, establishing that he was in a coma for almost a month after the incident, so there's no flicking through Sean's diary trying to catch up on the intricate details of what happened. We're informed once the episode begins of what happened, and this is the ideal way for it to start. We're met with pretty much the exact same knowledge as Sean in this scenario, and there is little disconnect with his character, so we feel like we're as informed as he is, which is an imperative part of designing a relatable character in a good story. I'm so glad for it. I really like the scene cut as well as Sean snaps his diary shut. That was a nice little touch. So then, we're met with a total of 4 choices to escape the hospital: to simply sneak out alone, to knock out Joey, for Joey to help you, or to knock the guard out outside your room. All of these will result in generally the same outcome: Sean taking his clothes from the staff room, some medicine, and fleeing the hospital. On the way down, if he is alive, we'll see Finn with the option to wake him and talk to him, either blaming him or forgiving him for what happened in Humboldt. It was a nice touch and solidifies Finn's place as the side character who has appeared the most in Life is Strange 2, with his presence in episodes 2, 3 and 4. This talk with him feels like a nice send-off if you choose to forgive him for what he did. Sean and Finn say their goodbyes and leave each other. Sean then descends the scaffolding into the parking lot where he hotwires and steals a car. I wasn't too happy about this, given that in episode 1 I was adamant about not breaking any laws as to not incriminate Sean, but more about that in my theory video for episode 5. Sean steals the car and we have a very nice atmospheric montage of him driving from California to Nevada with the beautiful Morales song A Long Road Ahead, which serves as a great parallel to episode 1 where this song played during the ending. Overall, really gorgeous graphics and settings. The atmosphere of this scene was on point. The dark silhouetted tree line against the pink and blue morning sunrise, the amazing transition between hilly California and flat Nevada in the daytime, Sean stopping to check the maps, the colour palette, the sunshine, it was all just immensely incredible. You know, I thought it was quite similar to the red scene from episode 2 where Sean and Daniel walk through Oregon together to Beaver Creek. Then, we're met with what is likely deemed to be the most controversial scene of the game. Sean stops to clean his eye and get some rest where he can examine parts of the car he stole. Reminded me a little bit of the Chloe's truck scene from Before the Storm, just slightly more criminal. The vibe and atmosphere of Sean smoking on the car bonnet at night was also really cool, and I kind of wish it was a moment of calm, honestly, it would have done great. Sean then sleeps, and we actually get a really nice dream flashback thing with Esteban, again highly reminiscent of BTS, except this time Sean is actually asleep and not hallucinating his dead father next to him. If you chose to kiss Finn, there's also the option to tell Esteban about it. They have a really nice heart-to-heart where Sean tells Esteban he wished I said I love you more, yet he's harshly woken up by 2 men, Chad and Mike, who are knocking on his window. They begin to racially harass Sean, asking him to speak in Spanish, which Sean can refuse or accept, or alternatively mock them in Spanish, saying things like soy un sucio ladrón y chinga tu madre, which means I'm a dirty thief and fuck your mother. If Sean chooses to keep his dignity and pride, he is beaten to the ground and kicked by Chad until Mike stops him and sends Sean on his way in the car. Personally, I love this scene from a storytelling perspective. It invoked so many uncomfortable emotions in me and made me feel so angry. Chad saying we took the country back even made me say out loud, Sean has nothing to do with fucking history. It made me angry in a way that was definitely intended, and for that I'm glad. Racism like this is real, and it's a justice to people who care and who are affected by it that don't not are willing to talk about it. I don't see this as political, because the game has been criticised for that a lot. Race is not inherently political. Being racist is not a political stance. Being racist is a personal choice that makes you a dickhead, plain and simple. I see Don't Nod criticised about politics a lot for Life is Strange 2, but I think that a lot of people fail to see that while Hank did echo a political sentiment with his build the wall comment, Chad and Mike did not. They were simply racists, not political. To dumb this down as being just politics would be hiding the issue at hand, and I for one really appreciated this talk in Life is Strange 2. Despite my humble opinion of being white and British, I think it really does justice to what happens in some parts of the world due to racism. That aside, the voice acting in that scene on Gonzalo's part was incredible. The guttered inhaling and exhaling when he was stumbling back into the car, the profane screaming and crying as he drove away. It was frightening, it was raw, it was real. In this moment it really hit me. Sean is 16, but he doesn't look or act like it at all. He's matured so much more beyond a 16-year-old. He's so much more older looking and sounding. It's easy to forget sometimes that Sean in episode 1 was so different to this, so young and innocent. This is a coming of age, but in a different way that we're used to in Life is Strange storytelling. Sean Diaz has been forced to become wise beyond his years. At only 16, he's endured and accomplished so much. This is a big theme in episode 4. He just keeps getting back up and fighting to keep both him and his brother safe and alive. The trauma has only moulded him into a stronger person, somebody who will not take shit from anybody, a person who can bear so much weight on his shoulders. This moment in the car shows that he struggles, but he's become so much older. His face, mannerisms, everything. So then Sean runs out of gas and we get a gameplay scene that feels really slow. Sean must walk instead of running. The sweat and sunburn in the midday Nevada heat is extreme. His gait signifies that he's been walking in the Nevada heat for hours. The heat is rising from the hot sand and tarmac, and animals roam the desert. It's creepy and bare and silent. The most isolated Sean has been all game likely. It's the only moment he has actually truly been alone, with nobody around for miles. He walks on until a trucker named Anton stops and offers him a ride. I like this choice, as its positioning right after the racist scene with Chad is not a coincidence. This scene is meant to test our trust and faith in people after such a violent beating. Do you, as the player and as Sean, accept help at the risk of being hurt again, or do you trust that Anton is a good person and hitch a ride with him? The decision to get a lift and trek to Haven Point will both get Sean there, although if he chooses to walk, his sunburn and weariness will be more exaggerated, and he will not be fed by Anton and have a smooth, comfortable journey there. Overall, this choice was a little bit pointless in the grand scheme of things, but I like the implicit message of trust and faith, which is a big theme of episode 4 being reinforced in such a minor way as hitchhiking. Upon our grand arrival at Haven Point, whether walking or driving, we're met with Sarah Lee Hackerman and her father at the door of the church. Sarah is a young girl who seems to be sick, coughing up a somewhat better cough than Roman, who's Daniel's voice actor in episode 2. The man gladly welcomes us into the church for the service and to witness a miracle, of which he's referring to Daniel's powers. Upon entering the church, the vibes are instantaneously creepy and unsettling. Our first glimpse into the true Haven Point is the Reverend Mother Lizbeth giving a speech about what it means to have faith, and talking about how a divine gift was bestowed upon her by the Lord himself, after which she introduces Daniel, who walks solemnly with his head bowed and is ushered up to the lectern and a microphone by a man from behind. He's brought out in a similar fashion to a performing animal, with really creepy layered voices praising Daniel as something divine.
Behold this miracle! Thank you, Danny. Believe! What? I can't believe it. Do you feel your soul rising like the cross? Bless you, Danny. Rise. Get up.
Grown men and women obsessing over this child. This perverted attachment to his power, using it to justify their faith, made me feel really ill and sympathetic for Daniel's position. As somebody who was really mad at Daniel after episode 3 for his brattiness and all, I felt really bad for him, sorry for him. The dark lighting in the church really reflected this sort of mood. The mix of browns and golds and blacks and reds distracted from the usual pure white lights of a church, which are typical to be found. It's interesting to note that on the outside, the Universal Uprising Church is a bright white, and on the inside, it's dark and solemn, which is a great metaphor for the church as a whole, seemingly pure and helpful but corrupt and dark at the core. This scene, I will say, made me so genuinely uncomfortable, from Daniel with his new hair, gait and creepy clothes, to the advertisements for the angel Daniel, Lizbeth's creepy exploitation of his gift, to the perverted, hushed awe around him. I felt really sick to my stomach in the best possible way. Dontnod really encapsulated a sense of dread and eeriness around the cult's use of Daniel in this moment, and the foreboding sense that this was going to be a complicated situation to get him out of. From here, Sean speaks with Sarah Lee, Jacob's younger sister, who answers a few of Sean's questions and alludes to the cultish nature of the church through her description of the Reverend Mother, who is allegedly blessed by the hand of God and can't ever sin, which puts us as the player a little on edge. We get the sense that there's something fishy going on, but we'll get onto that later. Sean is brought downstairs to a sweet reunion where Daniel throws his arms around his older brother. This felt slightly awkward to me. Not like a proper reunion. Maybe it needed music or something, but it also makes sense why this reunion wasn't overwhelmingly positive, as it was only a brief happy respite in an episode where Sean is fighting for his goal of getting Daniel back. Lizbeth Fisher, who I will just refer to as Lizbeth or Lizbitch from now on, presents herself as a friendly reverend through her words, yet Dontnod uses her body language and animation to convey her possessive intentions over Daniel. Midway through, Daniel is trying to convince Sean that they don't need to run to Mexico anymore and that Haven Point is a safe place for them. Lizbeth intervenes, holding Daniel's shoulders and being very possessive over touching him, as if he were a possession or her own child. She creates a barrier where Sean is uncomfortable to be close to Daniel due to her presence, and this did a great job at making me annoyed and uncomfortable with Lizbeth, as Sean has travelled all this way to see Daniel, as we can't have our dream reunion and leave. Lizbeth conveniently sends Daniel and Sarah Lee away to grab a medicine kit, which is a bit of an inconsistency given that she doesn't give medicine to anybody at the church, she cures them with prayers. A little bit weird, but we'll give her the benefit of the doubt. It's in the talk with Sean that her true nature begins to show. She shames and judges Sean through her tone of voice, saying you were away from Daniel for quite some time, and even talks about Sean sinning. She'll pick an example from the game which I really liked, such as if you forced Daniel to do the heist, stole from Hank, or let him kill the cougar, and she'll use this against Sean. Her true vindictive, manipulative nature is shown when Sean gently shakes her off him and she throws herself onto the floor, making her nose bleed, so she has this as an excuse to vilify Sean in front of Daniel and have him thrown out of the church. The moment where Sean is dragged away shouting Daniel's name while Lizbeth creepily stares at him and recites her faith mantra is so powerful. Sean feels so helpless in this moment, and as we get an awesome cinematic shot of the doors closing on the church, Sean is tossed to the ground outside, where he is faced with a foreshadowing type of decision, to get up or do nothing. This choice, however, has little consequence. Sean is just punched down to the ground again if he decides to get up, and the gate is slammed in his face, after which Nicholas threatens him with a gun. This is another glimpse at the cult's corrupt nature. They're clearly selectively preaching the Bible. Lizbeth is fine with ignoring science and medicine in order to maintain control over the cult, yet will happily disobey the first commandment, thou shalt not kill. We'll see more of this later, but this is part of what makes Lizbeth such a good villain within episode 4, her selectivity, her practice versus her preaching, her immunity to sin, and her perfect hushed awe. She's an exception to all of the rules that she enforces. So the next minute, Sean is met with what can be considered Life is Strange 2's biggest mystery, Karen, his mother. Sean is immediately angry and apprehensive, and this meeting is shocking and confusing. Nice choice of music in this scene by Dontnod, and the cinematography of the camera panning past Sean into Karen is nice. She reveals that she got a letter from Jacob, dulling my theory that she was evil all along, and she takes us back to her motel room, where we're met with a phone call to Jacob. He's terrified and excited to hear Sean's voice, telling him to meet him tomorrow since he can't talk. Yet more reference to the oppressive nature of the cult, which is a theme that they'll explore more with Jacob later. Sean gets a brief respite, a chance to relax at the motel. When Karen arrives, they can have a conversation about why she left, which is beautifully raw. Karen is such a well-modelled and designed character. She prefaces the conversation by telling Sean that she just wants him to know why she left. Not once does she ask for forgiveness or claim any right to her children or think that what she's doing makes up for the years she left. Karen is such a real person that people are kind of divided over. Some love her brutal honesty and some hate her. She talks to Sean about leaving, telling him that it was the hardest choice she ever made and that it broke her to do it, but that she would do it again given the choice. She wouldn't change the decision she made. She's selfish, but in a way that is real. She's been an awful parent to both Sean and Daniel, leaving without a trace, ghosting them for so many years. The beautiful thing about her character is that I can understand why she did it. It wasn't some drastic, unnecessary villainous choice that led her to abandon her kids. It was that she felt her life was slipping away and that she'd made the mistake of having children when it wasn't the life for her. She lived with her mistake in pain for so many years, pretending to be happy until it became too great and she cut all of her ties. And the better thing yet I can also understand Sean's resentment for her, the abandonment issues, the conflict between the two, and consequently their resolve is so real, so raw, and so human. Many people were complaining that after episode 4 that Karen's reveal was underwhelming, that she didn't have a dramatic reason for leaving, such as powers, her being abused by Esteban. She just left because she was doomed to be stuck in a life that pained her every day. And I think that's beautiful in its own way. In a game about Sean being beat, telekinetic powers, being on the run from the American FBI, Karen and Sean's conflict is just so human and down to earth. Both of them are such real people. Karen is hurting because she knows that she should never have had kids to hurt them, and Sean hurts because his mother left him for so long. Little parts of this are so realistic and touching, such as him refusing to call her mom, being reluctant to rely on her, not initially accepting the food, and being generally closed off to her. The dynamic feels so estranged and awkward at first, but if Sean chooses to hear Karen out, gradually, this tension will begin to ease just a little bit. Sean doesn't break down weeping in her arms, Karen doesn't pull a Sarah Gearhart and wallow in pity, she just tells Sean what happened and why, plain and simple. Her motives, as shitty as they were born from reason and a somewhat selfish desire to live her life. But as a young adult audience who is statistically more likely to have commitment issues themselves and be unsure of what they want in life, I can understand why Karen did what she did, and that's the beauty of it. It's targeted towards the Life is Strange audience, and we understand Karen. She may be the best written character in season 2 just based off this interaction. Her and Sean clash so much, yet little moments indicate their similarities. Smoking on the porch together, how Karen bears so much resemblance to Sean. You can tell somewhere under all of that hatred that Sean just wants his mother back. He just wants things to be how they used to. They mention night skies, camping in Vancouver. Karen even knows Sean's favourite type of burger, and specifically buys him this one. The double cheese no onion line does hint that she remembers a lot about him, and that he is a thought in her mind. This is a specific thing to remember, and I doubt her memory of Sean is limited to this. She talks about him like she knows him, and for Sean, it's like a little piece of his past that he never had for years. A parent. Sean has been facing everything alone, with no long-term support from any real adult. Sure, he had Finn, Cassidy and the Reynolds, but Sean was disjointed from his grandparents with their rules. Finn and Cassidy were young and unsure themselves and couldn't provide a real support network. Karen can support Sean through what he needs her to, and they're more similar than they think. Even as early as episode 2, Sean and Daniel go to the Christmas market precisely because they're stir-crazy with their grandparents and the strict rules. Sean even says, "Man, I think I see why Mom left now." Karen did the exact same thing as Sean. They're roamers with artistic elements through poetry and drawing, and find it hard to settle down where they're truly unhappy. I just thought it was an interesting parallel. So this is where the main body of the episode's excitement picks up. Sean and Karen begin to hatch a plan to get Daniel out of the cult, and they share a really nice moment, atmospheric as hell. Sitting outside and smoking in the moment of calm, Sean's bruised and sore feet against the hot floor, the cigarette smoke drifting in the hot Nevada desert breeze, with the sun cracking down over them, just sitting in silence. 10 out of 10 cinematography with the sunlight casting, and it was just a gorgeous moment in general. The Morale soundtrack really does boost moments like this. Sean and Karen can then share a nice bonding moment of changing Sean's eye dressing, which is nice but nothing to really note about it. It's a sweet scene where Sean can choose to trust her and finally accept her help. The next day we meet with Jacob on a scenic outlook, where he details exactly why he took Daniel from the camp that night. Now initially I thought Jacob had impure intentions, taking Daniel to Haven Point precisely to be used by Lizbeth. But I was sorely mistaken. Jacob says that he took him away because of the police raid and that he was in shock, in really bad shape. Given his potential gunshot wound, I can understand this motive. Jacob also informs us that he managed to take Sean's money he made in Humboldt County and that he'll give it back to him. Jacob then reveals that he has a plan to get Daniel out, but that he also needs to get his incredibly ill sister Sarah Lee out, since she's got pneumonia and isn't being treated. This moment to me engaged a little bit of a disconnect with Sean. Sean is angry and yelling, "Come on Jake, seriously?" or something along those lines. In my opinion, Sean should be a little more considerate about the guy who's about to help break his brother out of a cult. But oh well, that's a minor gripe I have, I guess. So, we're then sent off by Karen with a walkie-talkie and get a cool gameplay segment where we sneak into Lizbeth's house, which made me feel genuinely tense as I was playing. Sneaking around into buildings and to her house. It had me on the edge of my seat. I think there was more potential for puzzle gameplay though. I was talking with Stopmeo a few days ago after we'd played the episode, and she brought up a very interesting point that Sean, unlike Max, can't actually have huge puzzles because if he's caught, he's caught. Unlike Max, who can rewind time, which may be why puzzles worked better in season 1, but I digress. We enter Lizbeth's house, where there are definitely several things that unnerved me, in an intended way for sure. The strongest of these was definitely Liz Bitch's tickets, one adult and one child under the names Lizbeth Fisher and Daniel Fisher, and an article about how she wants to adopt Daniel. This perverted, illegal, self-righteous adoption of Daniel under her surname makes me feel really uneasy. It's as if she really did see Daniel as her true son, having held him captive for 2 months. In Daniel's room, we have the opportunity to loot some of his stuff, such as the raccoon sweater or his dad's blanket. His room is clean and creepy, with some depraved drawings on the wall with religious symbolism, such as Daniel holding up the cross, and a family portrait of him and Lizbeth. I thought it was interesting to note that Sean and Daniel both shared the parallel here of having strikingly bare and uncomfortable looking rooms. Sean had the white, sterile walls of a hospital room, while Daniel had the brown, dreary walls of Lizbeth's house. It's interesting to note that while Daniel was free, Sean likely had better living conditions. Then we walk into Lizbeth's office, where we find Sarah's file and discover that she had pneumonia. Then we discover that Jacob was forced through conversion therapy. This was a really unexpected reveal, but we finally find out why Jacob lost his faith. He was cast out of the Haven Point community because he was gay, and it caused him to lose his faith. His exile meant that he got to meet open-minded people like Finn. The emotional music in this scene is really on point, nailing home Jacob's pain and anguish when talking about what happened. He's downcast, even more than usual, but what I really like about this scene is that it gives so much more context to Jacob as a character. Why he blends into the background, why he's quiet, apprehensive and nervous, and why he feels a little bit uncomfortable around Finn and the other sexually open people in Humboldt. He's been through years of trying to oppress himself to hide the way he is for fear of being judged. I remember criticizing Jacob's character for simply being the perfect, boring, quiet, silent villain in episode 3, but in episode 4 he is handled amazingly, with layers of depth and complexity being added to him. Don't Nod also chooses this moment to expand its bases from racism into homophobia, more specifically institutional and organised religious homophobia. If Nicholas catches Sean and Jacob in the room, Nicholas will hit Jacob and call him a fag. He's often shunned or ignored in the community, it seems, and he's made to feel like he must repent for his alleged sinning. This was handled very well by Don't Nod. It wasn't too excessive, it was just a mention, but it made me angry to see and hear, and that was done through animations and voice acting. Very big props to them, it was a very good moment. So after this, we're either thrown into the church by Nicholas, or we enter with Karen for our final showdown with Lizbeth the Reverend, who is definitely worse than Jefferson. After refusing to get Sarah Lee any medication for her, at least Jefferson targeted people who were over 18 and was deceptive yet honest to his victims. Obviously still a psychopath and a horrible person who deserves to be buried, yet Lizbeth preys on poor families who are seeking help from their past sins and manipulates them for money and power. She'll stop at nothing, even harming children, to maintain her perfect religious image. We see this in the following scene a few times. Sean is repeatedly beaten down by Nicholas, who seems to be Lizbeth's right-hand man. This scene, in my humble opinion, is the most powerful scene in any Life is Strange game. Sean knows in this moment he cannot fight back. When he pushed Lizbeth the day before, she threw herself onto the floor and vilified Sean. No, Sean knows he mustn't physically fight. He knows that the only way he is able to show Daniel that he loves him is to be beaten down, time after time again, only to rise back up with a smile, so that his brother will see Nicholas and Lizbeth beat him, an innocent teenager, to the ground and notice that they are the bad people in this situation. The animations from Daniel in this segment are really well done in an odd way. He has this look of dazed confusion on his face, like he's out of it, scared, in shock. His feet are frozen, his mind caught between the last 2 months of brainwashing and the unbridled love from his brother. Don't Nod really did not pull any punches with Sean's injury here. He gets up again and again, bloodied and battered, choking blood out of his mouth and throat, continuing to remind Daniel of Esteban and how things would be if none of this had happened, to remind us of happier times. Another interesting thing is that Sean being beaten up and refusing to fight, only getting back up and talking, is very biblical in itself. Now, I don't know much about faith or the Bible. I'm an atheist myself, but there's something incredible about Shaun refusing to harm Lizbeth and Nicholas, and simply getting back up while they are committing biblical atrocities and disobeying their own faith in order to harm a child. Shaun is pitting their own faith and beliefs against them. Daniel's introduction to Karen was also handled incredibly realistically and well. All game, Daniel has idolised his mother, talking about how he wants to see her and speak to her. I think that Daniel had a lapse in his judgment, both of Karen and of himself. He presumed that meeting his mother for the first time would bring a sense of comfort and familiarity, that she would be like Esteban and keep him safe. But after so long spent with Lizbeth, and the fact that he's never met his mother to a point that he can remember her, he's confused and upset by it. Lizbeth naturally preys on this moment to call it a miracle, to which Karen rightfully calls her out. This scene makes me feel powerful as Shaun for once. I could feel the intense bond between Shaun and Daniel growing again in that moment. Each time Shaun gets back up, as hurt as he is, he irradiates and commands power and energy, destroying Lizbeth's control over Daniel without laying a finger on her. This is when the church starts burning, which adds an amazing atmosphere. It has some hellish imagery with the fire rising around them, which is ironic as it's taking place within a church. The scape is dark and hellish, with audio layers of music burning and vocals being used to exasperate and fuel this moment of extreme tension. The grand crescendo of this scene is when Shaun has a gun held to his head by Nicholas, during which he delivers the line, "If you want to kill me, then do it. I'm not afraid. Go ahead. Shoot me in the face and live with it." This line has multiple layers to it and is very bold, clever writing on the part of Don't Nod. Here, Shaun is showing that he is literally willing to sacrifice his own life to die in order to prove to Daniel that the cult is evil and he is not. Daniel finally cracks when Lizbeth is frantically demanding that Shaun be shot and killed. Daniel snaps to his senses after seeing how willing and ready she was to kill Shaun, who had done nothing wrong, and throws Nicholas to the side. There is an awkward moment of tension here where all of the characters simply stand still for a moment, which I didn't really like. But then we get a real, honest hug between the Diaz brothers, and Daniel, with tears in his eyes, confesses that he is sorry and that he thought Lizbeth was somebody else. The "and live with it" of the aforementioned line is powerful in itself. He challenges Nicholas to morally kill him as a Christian, which would mean disobeying a commandment. If Daniel witnessed this, I can almost guarantee he would have killed Lizbeth and Nicholas on the spot. However, this moment is so visually tense, the cinematography, panning from a vicious and desperate Lizbeth and a petrified Daniel to an unsure Nicholas to Karen, who's frozen still, and Shaun, who's the only confident, strong one in this scene, standing headfirst at the barrel of a pistol until he is saved. As the trio, Karen and his sons walk away to the door and Lizbeth blocks their path. This is where the ending is somewhat similar to episode 3's. Depending on your choices, Daniel will either decide to hurt Lizbeth or not. There are 4 branching choices to this. If Daniel has a certain stance about killing and violence and a low trust of Shaun, he will attempt to murder Lizbeth no matter what until Shaun guns her down first, which is a dramatically shocking moment as Shaun either falls to his knees after pulling the trigger, or Daniel detaches Lizbeth's head and brain from his spinal cord with his power. If Daniel has higher obedience and trust, he will stop hurting Lizbeth on Shaun's command and will drop her. Alternatively, Daniel might not decide to hurt Lizbeth at all, and Shaun is met with the choice to either threaten her or tell Daniel to move her. Upon threatening her with the gun, she makes a creepy, depraved comment about how she embraces death. After this, Shaun can choose to tell Daniel to throw her out of the way or shoot her himself. Very few people choose to shoot Lizbeth, but let me tell you, it was satisfying to do. The noise of the gun, Karen's shocked face, and watching all of her bullshit power fade away in an instant was gratifying and powerful in a way. Interesting to note that Daniel will actually have different facial expressions depending on Lizbeth's fate. Then, as they leave, the cinematography really starts to pick up. The first shot we get as we move into a pre-rendered cutscene is the cross on top of the church being burned. A cross being burned generally was a symbol used by the Ku Klux Klan. However, the general meaning of a cross burning is apparently to convey evil being destroyed and killed, which seems quite apt for this situation. We then get a montage of either Lizbeth and Nicholas, or just Nicholas depending on whether she survives or not, running from the church after Karen and her sons walk out, desperately crying on her knees at the fallen building. There's something magical that I can revel in here. If our gratification isn't satisfied by killing Lizbeth, seeing her stumble and haphazardly grab at her entire life's work before her certainly fulfills it. One moment she had it all, yet the next her world began to fall, away from all that it had once become. complete with the track Meaning, the smoke in the air, the orange sky. The scene had this apocalyptic, tragic yet empowering feel to it, with an air of finality. We then get a really sweet matchup cut up onto the cliff with Sean, Daniel, Jacob, Karen and Sarah Lee, where the late afternoon lighting is cast over them as they watch over Haven Point. Sean and Jacob hug one another, as do Daniel and Sarah Lee, and we get a big ooh-woo moment with Sean, Karen and Daniel when they drive away, where Daniel hugs Sean and holds his hand from behind, and they drive away, presumably to Arizona. And that's it. Episode 4 is all wrapped up and finished. I really loved this episode from start to finish. You know, there were some disjointed moments for sure, and I'll get on to those, but I'm going to mention the things I did at the start of this video and talk in a general sense about how I feel that they were handled. First off, characters. Characters were handled, for the most part, kind of average in episode 4, apart from Karen and Jacob, who were arguably main or secondary characters. Tertiary characters tended to be quite flat and two-dimensional, such as Joey. As much as I liked him, he's just a cheery nurse. Maria Flores seems interesting, and I hope we meet her again in episode 5. Chad and Mike seemed like realistic racists, but other than that, their characters kind of had no depth, which can kind of be forgiven since that's the point. Lizbeth was quite a generic villain. I prefer more when villainous motives are rooted in past traumas or motives rather than just pure ideologies. Lizbeth was pure evil, motivated by money and power, and while I like that, I feel like sometimes in Life is Strange it isn't handled too well, such as with Jefferson or Dave and Merrick. I wish that we had a moment, even if only brief, to feel sorry for Lizbeth and question our choice of potentially killing her. On the flip side, Karen's abandonment story was told amazingly. I talked about it extensively. It's so damn human and so raw and amazing, even though I've repeated those words hundreds of times. Jacob's story was also told in a way I didn't expect, but it was well handled and it touched upon a few issues of religious homophobic oppression. Music. This is quite a black and white thing. The Morale soundtrack was great as always, and the one licensed track we got was really good and fit the ending incredibly. However, this was the only licensed song, whereas we would normally get 2 or 3 per episode. We had 4 tracks in episode 1, 2 in episode 2, 3 in episode 3, yet only 1 in episode 4. I feel like Anton's truck would have been a good moment to play some licensed music and have an atmospheric driving montage. It was definitely missing from this scene. Animation, amazing all around. I don't have any complaints here. It's Life is Strange, so obviously the lip sync is never perfect, but damn I love the body animations. They felt powerful and real, and the facial expressions were top notch. General quality, no bugs were encountered by me, though I do know some people have reported issues. Nothing game breaking, but still I personally took a bit of the issue with some of the clipping and glitching with Lizbeth's model in particular, her hair and robes. But this is honestly a minor detail which can kind of be overlooked. Gameplay. The interactivity with Sean getting back up again and again was fantastic and quite well implemented. Obviously nothing as inventive as trimming weed, but I like the escape segment of the hospital a lot too, and sneaking around Haven Point. Choices. Now, there were a lot of get beat up choices in this episode, which didn't have a lot of consequences, since Sean is alone for a lot of the episode and it just influences his bruises. And it doesn't make any choices to influence Daniel behaviour, so this doesn't change. However, I see small consequences from the previous episode making their play here, and our choices with Karen were very meaningful, even if a lot of people chose the same thing. And finally, overall story. Episode 4 was my favourite. The unapologetic themes of ableism, homophobia, and obviously racism, cult followings and how toxic they can be, and Sean's estranged relationship with his mother, discussing real-life themes of abandonment. It was amazing. The only thing I was really disappointed about was that Sean had zero opportunity to call Lila in episode 4, when the opportunity could have been presented multiple times, such as at the hospital or even in Karen's motel room or Lizbeth's house. Lila seems to be forgotten about, dead in the water, which doesn't really make sense. So many people love her. I really hope that we get to call her in episode 5, but I doubt it. We'll see. Anyway, those are my thoughts about episode 4, and if you stuck with this video, I'd like to thank you so much for joining me on this journey. It's been a longer one than normal, and you're all absolutely wonderful and precious for joining me with it. I know that episode 5 is coming out soon. My channel might fade into obscurity because nobody will really care as much about Life is Strange 2 content anymore, but I'm so grateful for how you've all embraced these videos and shown me so much support. I see so many of you in the comments regularly discussing away. I notice that you're the same people, you're genuine supporters who are passionate about this game like I am, and for that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for following the Wolf Brothers journey with me. As always, you can follow my Twitter in the description, check out my Fiverr account where I do voiceovers for hire and all of that good stuff. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to keep your cucumbers serrated and have an amazing day, guys. Bye.